Someone recently asked me what are some of my go-to keys and synth sounds, and I thought I'd just make a quick video to cover that all. So I mainly use a mixture of software-based instruments and synthesizers. Some of them are presets and things that come bundled with the software that I use, which is Logic and Ableton, and others are synths that I've made myself, particularly in a bit of software called Reaktor by Native Instruments. You can kind of like build your own synths in there. I'm going to break down basically most of my go-to key sounds for generic all-purpose things. So yeah, most of it is stuff that I use with software. The one sort of main bit of hardware that I have is this Critter Guitari Pocket Piano synth, which I use quite a lot. It's one of my favourite things that I own, and I'll kind of cover this later. And yeah, I guess I'll just sort of crack on. Beginning with Logic, there are a lot of sounds that I really like in the sampler that I use. This used to be called the EXS24, but in the new version they now just call it a sampler. Yeah, it's got a few things that I use quite a lot in it as just sort of go-tos. On their own in isolation they will sound a little bit naff, but with the right kind of combination of processing, and if they're in context in a full mix, you can often get away with them. They actually sound quite good. So starting with the Steinway Grand Piano 2. By the way, if you don't have any of the sounds that I've got, or you don't see the same categories as me, if you go to Logic Pro, where is it, Sound Library, Open Sound Library Manager, here's where you can download all of Apple's built-in sound libraries and things. But yeah, anyway, here's the grand piano. So yeah, that's not bad. Another one that I really like in here is the vibraphone. Not bad for a free sampled vibraphone. So that's a good one. I use quite a few of the sort of plinky plonky natural sounds that are in this. I'm not sure how to describe that, but some of these, depending on how we're processing them and how we're using them in the track, they can kind of work quite nicely. But yeah, what I mean by plinky plonky is, for example, the acoustic guitar harmonics. And the electric guitar harmonics are also pretty good. Where are those electric guitar harmonics? I'm also a fan of the Celesta. Yeah, that's also a nice one. And I also like to use the glockenspiel on the xylophone from time to time. And the xylophone. That's a few built into here that I use quite a lot. And they also infinitely all improve when you put something like Valhalla Vintage Verb on it, which is a really popular reverb, but for good reason, I think. So I usually set it something like this. I bring the low cut of the EQ up just to take any sort of like muddiness out, and increase the modulation depth a little bit, which kind of affects the tuning of the reverb tail. It makes it sound kind of ethereal and nostalgic, I guess. So let's give that a try. So I'll just show you what some of those presets sound like now through the Valhalla Vintage Verb, because this is like one of my go-to things to start with a lot of the time if I'm just starting to write an idea and I want a good sound to just sort of kick off with. Yeah, I'm quite into the sort of like atmospheric post-rock washy type of thing, so it's one of my sort of like go-to setups, I guess. Let's try some of those other things. Vibraphone. So yeah, already with that, it kind of makes quite a lot of difference to some of these sounds. Let me get that guitar one out again. I'll just kind of show what I mean. I've run out of range, but yeah, that one's pretty useful for that. I like these kind of plinky sounds because I tend to do a lot of like IDM glitchy sort of things as well. Like I will record keys parts that I play to audio and then like cut it up and rearrange it to kind of make a more like IDM-y sequence out of things that I play. And in terms of like the sort of sound that I like that kind of, don't know what you call it, like twilighty, moody sort of melodies and that kind of thing. Spookiness, like a phrase that comes to mind. I don't actually know theory, I'm like a self-taught keys player, and I just kind of like train myself by learning songs that I like and just figuring them out by ear. I'm a guitarist, so I work out some shapes on guitar that I know on keys, and there are certain sounds that I like that evoke certain things, like moody, quite like Chopin sort of things, and chromatic riffs where that sort of thing is happening in the phrase, or like the clashing of two notes that are right next to each other, like that sort of dissonance appears in lots of chord shapes that I use. Also like to kind of, yeah, as I was saying, like glitch things out, but to just kind of demonstrate that quickly, I'll use this plugin called Effectrix to kind of simulate some sort of glitchiness. And I'll just like play a few phrases through this, random things. And if I start the sequencer, and if I put a metronome on, that'll help me out as well. So. So yeah, some of these kind of like plinky, short attack kind of sounds that are built into this are pretty useful for certain things, I think. Let me try out the, I was talking about earlier, xylophone. That's quite a good one. So yeah, it's not really particularly deliberate, but it's kind of why I think these sounds, these like short ones, work really well for this kind of sound, rather than some of the strings and the brass like sound a bit weird if you try and do that with it. Maybe I can demonstrate that. Actually, maybe that's kind of cool, but yeah, that's some of my go-to sounds within Sampler. There's actually one more thing that I use quite a lot, which is a bass sound. One of my go-to bass sounds is this synth bass patch called Mini Pulse Bass. Yeah, by default, it's not quite how I want it. The way that I set it up is to turn the filter off within Sampler. And then I'm going to slap a chorus on that, chorus effect. Turn up the intensity in the mix. And then I usually slap a filter on that afterwards. I'll just use the Logic one called Auto Filter. Bring the cutoff down and the resonance up. So yeah, I use that quite a lot. That's one of my sort of go-to bass sounds that I use in a lot of tracks. It's kind of like a electronic bass. And yeah, it can sound really, really nice underneath some drum and bass sort of breaks and some nice Rhodes chords. I'll try and record like a little loop with it in a sec. So yeah, some good stuff in the sampler. You can also layer them up like this. So this is something I might do sometimes. Let's say that that's going to be glockenspiel. Probably kind of hear if you're familiar with any of my music, like some of the tones might sound a bit familiar now. And yeah, this is some of my like go-to basic sounds that I use with built-in Logic things. Other good free plugins or sounds come from this thing called Labs by Spitfire Audio. And there's one default one in here called Soft Piano. I'm in love with this thing, I use it a lot. So yeah, that's a good one. You can get lost in that one for quite a long time. And other things that I find useful in here, I do like the strings. The strings are good. The short ones are good too. Pizzicato strings, not bad as well. And the resonator, the music box thing at the end is also not bad as a sort of alternative to the glockenspiel in sampler. I think that's pretty much it for the things that are free. Some other of my go-tos are Fabfilter One. It's just a basic little synth from Fabfilter. I use this a lot for lead synths, for example. Yeah, so it's kind of handy for that type of thing. Pretty much just use it for that, really. My other go-to sort of keys plugins are the Arturia Stage 73, which is like a pretty basic Rhodes. I pretty much just use it like this, in the most basic way. That's if I'm working in Ableton or something, I'll generally lean towards that. Another one for just straight up piano sounds is the Piano 5 by Arturia. Take that down a little bit. So that's the Piano 5, and moving on to some others. What's another go-to? Oh, I like the Arp-2600. There's one particular preset in this that I use quite a lot, which is called Mermaid, and this is cool kind of, another kind of thing that I use like a lead synth sound. It's cool for kind of square pushery type of things, but also old school fusion, I'd say, is also a good usage of this type of sound. Yeah, so good for that kind of thing. Silly, quick, fast, noodly runs. So the other things I use, some of my go-to sounds are sounds that I've made myself in Reaktor. Reaktor is everything, it does everything. How did I make this? Yeah, I can't remember. I think I just followed some YouTube tutorial, sort of like learning how to make your own synth in Reaktor. And through the process of studying that and like trying some other things out, I made this, it's like an instrument that I use to create ambient synth tones that sound quite nice and organic. So if I just give it a little blast. So you can change the... It's also really good for like long ambient pads like this. Yeah, it's also good at some other things. Blinky key sounds. If I reshape this a little bit. Use that quite a bit for pads and stuff like that. Another one is my BOC lead, stands for Boards of Canada. Kind of evokes their vibe, I guess. So that's another one of my go-tos. This is a sort of horrible bass synth that I made. Yeah, has its uses every now and again. Okay, so I guess the last thing to kind of talk about is the pocket piano here, this little guy. I'll give you a quick demonstration of what this sounds like before I put any of effects on it. The built-in effects in Ableton tend to be my go-tos to use with this, and because I often sync this pocket piano up over MIDI, I'll get into that in a bit, but for now, yeah, I'll just kind of show you what the basic sounds of this thing sound like. So on the red mode, by default, it's just a basic synth. So this knob on the left controls the modulation, so this is the speed knob. Yeah, these two knobs on the left, they do something different in each mode that this has. So this third knob is the global pitch, and this is just the master volume, so. This first button here on the left determines the waveform of this patch. So you can change the tone of the synth, for example. Sometimes I make parts like that just from rhythmically changing the waveform when I'm holding a chord down. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that mode. Then after that, I like to use this. This is like a weird arpeggiator mode. So yeah, that's kind of like a weird arpeggiator. The green one is like a normal arpeggiator, I guess. In this mode, this knob becomes like a release or a decay feature. So, and this controls the speed of the arpeggiator. So all the way to the right is slower. And then as I turn it to the left, it will get faster. The blue one is another sort of bass arpeggiator, I guess. This is like a bass patch, or weird FM synth, I guess. This pink purple one here is one of my favourites. It's an arpeggiator, but this controls like a filter, I guess. And in this mode, if you press this red flashing button, the arpeggiator will jump up an octave. So yeah, that's basically all the modes on the Pocket Piano. But the main thing that I think that makes it powerful is its ability to link it via MIDI to the MIDI clock of Ableton. Hopefully, I've got this set up already. So yeah, as you can hear, that arpeggiator is like perfectly in time with the click track. I'll often create loops from sending MIDI to this arpeggiator setting and tweaking the settings as I go. So I'm just going to set up the Pocket Piano in a slightly different way. At the moment, I've got it coming in on an audio track. So that's receiving audio directly from this. But I want to set this up in a slightly different way because then I'll be able to send chords to the Pocket Piano, so I won't have to hold down the notes constantly. So that should now send to the Pocket Piano. So yeah, now that you can hear that is pretty much perfectly in time with the Ableton's click track here. If I change the tempo, you'll hear it change with it. So that's pretty useful, because now I can do things like this. So that's great, but the next thing that's cool about that is any time-based effects will also be perfectly in time with the arpeggiators here. Again, the reason I'm using Ableton instead of Logic to do this is because Ableton just kind of works a bit smoother for linking external MIDI devices, and it's a bit easier to set up, like the way you've just seen it. The way to do it is just slightly more fiddly, and the tempo tracking doesn't seem to be as reliable as Ableton, so that's why I kind of use this program for that type of task. But yeah, for example, if I send this to send B, which I have a delay here set up, and I'm just going to change the settings a little bit. I'm going to set that to ping pong. And now with that kind of nice looping pattern, I'll see if I can create some interesting stuff out of it. So I'm going to try something else here, which is putting on an arpeggiator device. So because this is dealing with the Pocket Piano as MIDI instead of audio, I can use MIDI effects. So I'm going to randomize the note data that is being sent to the Pocket Piano from my chord, so it thinks that more notes are being played. And yeah, check this out. So this steps control is basically adding octaves above. It's playing the same, it's selecting these notes, but is randomly playing some of them the octave above. And the steps controls how many octaves it goes up. One step is it will go up one more octave, 2 steps, it will go up 2 octaves, and so on. If I lower my chord, the input MIDI, to be an octave lower, it should be less extreme. But you kind of want to have a few steps up for more variation. So that's something I like to do quite a lot of, is using this delay and the Pocket Piano to create kind of nice ambient synth looping textures like that. If I turn up the feedback and I'm just going to set up an audio track here called PP Record, and I'm going to take the audio from that, I'm going to record it here. So I'm just going to hold on to that. But yeah, you can see what I just did is recorded everything, all that manual adjustment that I was doing on the Pocket Piano is now recorded here with the delay to an audio file. And I can export that and go and use that in Logic if I want to. Just to quickly wrap this up, I'm going to just give a quick demonstration of how I might use this Pocket Piano and the keyboard in a live context, or how I set them up for live performance. Now I'm going to create a MIDI track with one of my, like, say, my Rhodes plugins on it. Okay, so I've just created a MIDI track with my Arturia Stage 73 on it. And I'm going to send that to Reverb Send A. I'm going to put Valhalla Vintage Verb on that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send the output of these send tracks to their own track here, and you'll see why I'll do that in a minute. So for audio, sends in. Okay, so there we go. Cool, so now I can start doing some stuff. For example, actually, let's set up the Pocket Piano as an arpeggiator thing again. External instrument, MIDI to Scarlett, MIDI from input 1. Okay, so so I've got my 3 tracks here now, and I'm going to group those together. I'm going to call that instruments group, and then this is another one of my little sort of go-to tricks, is to put on this thing called Beat Repeat, which is built into Ableton. It's great. I use this a lot for like live glitches. So the first thing I'm going to do is change it from mix to instrument mode. I'm going to turn the chance knob all the way down to 0, which basically defines the likelihood of the beat repeat effect engaging itself randomly. And then I'm going to assign the repeat on button to a button on my nano control thing here. The grid knob I'm going to assign to a knob here. And now if I play something, so yeah, that's kind of like a go-to fun way that I set up my gear for writing and live performance. But yeah, hope some of that is useful info. Yeah, that pretty much covers all this stuff to do with the basic key sounds that I use. Give us a like if you've enjoyed what you've seen, and let me know if you've got any questions or you want me to cover any other topics. I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, cheers.